Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this final session of the Stockholm Plus 50 edition of the United Nations Science Policy Business Forum on the Environment. My name is Axel Threlfall. I'm editor-at-large at Reuters. It has been a real honor for me to have hosted, to have moderated so many sessions over the past couple of days. I am truly thrilled to be part of this committed and inspirational community that is so determined to create positive change for the people and the planet. This final session is a leadership dialogue entitled Stockholm Plus 100, Shaping Our Common Future. With the past 50 years in the rearview mirror, we asked today, what are the building blocks for doing better? And we're going to attempt to answer this question through the vision, the perspective of a number of sustainability warriors, I think we can call them, who hold the power, the knowledge, the determination to create impact and lead institutions on the right path. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring them up in one by one to do a TED-style talk, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll keep 3 of them together on the stage and ask them what we want to ask them, and I will come to you as well for your questions. The dictionary definition of vision is the act of power and of imagination. When we apply vision to the future, we create not only aspiration, but a determination to guide and direct our actions. Now, in 1972, here in Stockholm, where it all began, scientists really did speak truth to power and ignited the first spark of environmental solidarity that led to the birth of the multilateral system. Today, history repeats itself, and on the eve of Stockholm Plus 50, I am delighted to invite Professor Maria Ivanova, co-chair of the Science Committee addressing Stockholm Plus 50, and once again speaking truth to power, to share with us the message of science. This is a message that Maria, by the way, is going to deliver over the next couple of days, and we are going to get a sneak preview now. Maria, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So wonderful to see you all. Thank you very much. Indeed, I am speaking on behalf of scientists, natural scientists, social scientists, engineers, humanities scholars. And today, we are addressing the governments on the eve of the Stockholm conference, the Stockholm Plus 50 conference, repeating a message the 2,200 scientists wrote and delivered to the Stockholm conference 50 years ago. And they said, look what's happening. You have to act now. We have to act now. And now, 50 years later, we are looking in the rearview mirror and saying, scientists saw the future. They knew what was happening. And the International Science Council, Future Earth, and Stockholm Environment Institute put together a group of scientists, social scientists, engineers, and humanities scholars to do a second letter. I have the honor to co-chair that group, and my co-chair is presenting the message right now to the Science Conference, and I'm presenting here the Science Policy Business Forum. The message is that we knew what would happen. Much of the worst predictions did not take place, but a lot has taken place. A lot of environmental problems persist, and many are getting worse. But so what? What do we do? And we talked about this yesterday. We need inspiration. To be acting, we need to be pushed, but not by doom and gloom. We need to act because we know it's the right thing. And so as scientists, we've seen the progress and the peril, and we have 3 messages. One is redefine what we, societies, and individuals strive for. What is good and what is, as the Swedes say, lagom, enough. what is good and what is enough, what is lagom. And it's only a Swedish word that denotes exactly the enough. Enough to thrive. Not just to survive, but to thrive. We also need to recognize privilege. And that with privilege, we have responsibilities. With privilege comes responsibility. And we need to take that as individuals, but also as societies. And our third message is indeed that collective action is critical. As societies, we have to act. But as societies, we have to empower each other, our politicians, our companies, and today we'll hear more about the companies and their inspired work. And so we hope that that will inspire even us even further. And so what we have to do, and by we, I mean each and every one in our sector, in our role. And so I speak here as an educator, as a university professor. We have the duty to inspire our citizens. Today at the Science Conference, we started with art. We started with all of the messages by young people presented as a play. It was fascinating. And the young people said, if we only listen to science, that will be our undoing. And it really hit me. It's like, I'm supposed to go to the Science Policy Business Forum, and this is the Science Conference. And we're saying, if we only listen to science, this will be our undoing. We need to touch people's hearts. We need to talk to each other. We need to inspire. And so our letter, which appeared in the journal Nature today, and it is also on its own bespoke website, Science 4, number 4, Stockholm 50, number 50, .world. Science for Stockholm 50.world. You can read the entire letter. And in the journal Nature. And I'll finish by saying, here is our message to the world. We, and that includes each and every one of us, as societies, as individuals, we must become good ancestors and better neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. It's always a pleasure to listen to you. And it's almost, I almost wish we were finishing the whole session with that message. But let me ask you a couple of questions. And by the way, if there is anyone in the audience who want to ask a question, you might have to yell as well as raise your hands, because I can't see you very clearly. Okay, so you said if we only listen to science, that'll be our undoing. I mean, the point of this forum, Science Policy Business Forum, is we've got to listen to science, we've got to listen to business, and we've got to listen to the policymakers. We've got to listen to all of them, right? That will be a triple undoing.
We have to have culture. We have to have the humanities. We have to have art. We have to speak to each other at a different level, not just as scientists, as politicians, as business people.
Okay, so this will be called the Science Policy Business Culture Forum next year.
No, we could start with culture. We could end with culture, right? It doesn't need to be in the name, but it needs to be in the essence of it.
At the risk of sounding really cynical, and I hate playing the devil's advocate role as I usually have to do. How different is your message going to sound next year, do you think? Do you think it really will sound different? Do you think when will you be able to stand here and actually say, we've been inspired, we've been educated, and people are acting on that now?
I'm saying that now. I'm saying that right now, Axel. That letter written 50 years ago has inspired us to write another letter. Mm-hmm. It didn't scare us into writing another letter. It inspired us to write another letter. And I'm in the business of convening people to have these conversations. We talked about the importance of dialogues yesterday. And I'll tell you just one anecdote that actually responds to your story. So we convened all of UNEP's executive directors for the first and only time in 2009 in Lyon in Switzerland, along with the people who created the system that imagined the Stockholm conference and what was happening. And we brought young people from around the world. A lot of the young people in the audience, half of the young people in the audience said, "Oh my God, they have been talking the same thing for 30 years. This is trouble." The other half of the young people said, "Wow, they have been talking about the same thing for 30 years and they're still inspired. We got work to do." So I think we'll always have these two parts, these two types of reactions, and we get to choose how we react. And yesterday, I talked to you a little bit about, you asked everyone, is the glass half full or half empty?
Yep.
And I always say, oh, my glass is half full. And then it hit me yesterday when you were asking everybody that actually the worst thing is when you enter a conversation, a dialogue, a room, and your glass is full. If your glass is full, you cannot take any more. And so our glass always has to be half full and half empty at the same time, so we could take new knowledge, we could have new inspiration, and we can answer Axel's questions.
All right, very good. Maria, I'm going to stop it there. Thank you so much. Please don't drop it. Maria Ivanova, thank you so much. All right, let's kick off with these TED-style talks now. As I said, I'm going to invite individuals up one by one, sit them in threes, and then we can ask them what we want to ask them. His Excellency Colin Vixen Kelapile, the President of ECOSOC, we heard from him a couple of times over the past couple of days. ECOSOC is, of course, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, the curator, if you like, the custodian, I should say, of the SDGs. So, Mr. President, you have your 3 to 4 minutes starting now. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, moderator, and good afternoon to everyone. Let me say, really, I believe I can claim to speak on behalf of we the people. We the people in the context that I preside over one of the principal organs of the United Nations. And we all draw our mandate from the Charter of the United Nations. So ECOSOC, as the moderator is saying, it's entrusted the responsibility to support the global development agenda. So what I'm really impressed about at this session is to hear the voices of the partners to member states. Goal number 17 is about partnership for the development goals. And that partnerships means what it says. It means contributions not only from governments, but also from other stakeholders like yourselves. The means of implementation, financing, it was highlighted from the sessions, technologies that are needed to back up our actions, the development of data, which I heard a lot about yesterday, what is lacking and what is needed. So for us to stand the best chance to leave no one behind, we must ensure that we are able to measure accurately the progress that we are making or lack thereof. And therefore, disaggregated data, as it was emphasized, is very key if we are to ensure that indeed by 2030, when we say we have not left anyone behind, we are accurately assured based on accurate data. So I'm very happy to hear the messages that came from the sessions, the dedication you are giving to ensuring that the tools that we need in the form of data is something that you take very seriously amongst yourselves. We have only 7 years left. We are halfway through the decade of action. So let us do what we can to ensure that we can accelerate the achievement of the SDGs. We have had unfortunate mishaps, of course, as I said in my remarks as well. COVID-19 has reversed all the development gains of decades. We are now also facing serious geopolitical tensions, which have unleashed a lot of serious implications on the global supply chains for energy and essential commodities. We can only overcome this if we continue to work to strengthen multilateralism. The international community needs to work together to avoid any divisions that are taking us even further back. But one area which I want to highlight is the issue of financing, really. I'm very happy that many of you highlighted this as a real significant challenge. We have seen and we are concerned about commitments after commitments which are not met by the provision of the finances that are required to meet a lot of those commitments. Climate financing, the transitions that are expected from fossil fuels to renewables are not any cheaper. Developing countries cannot afford to transition without the support with the financing that is required to do so. We just concluded in April our other very important forum in ECOSOC, the Financing for the Development Forum, the FFD. I hope you will take time. I know some of you participated in contributing to the content. I hope you can take time to again look at the commitments that have been made in terms of financing and make the contribution that you can also as private businesses and industry. Let me say that, again, I'll repeat, our flagship event of July, the high-level political forum on sustainable development, is fast approaching. We will hear from 45 countries that are going to present their voluntary national reviews. Some are coming for the first time, some are coming for the second time, some are coming for the third time, and we are seeing a few already starting to come for the fourth time. So they will tell the world what they are doing to implement the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. So this year, there are 5 SDGs that are going to be reviewed in depth. One of those is SDG number 4 on quality education. The other is SDG number 5 on gender equality. The other one is goal number 14 on life below water, and goal number 15, life on land. And there is the standard one, which is reviewed annually. All the time it appears, goal number 17. And there is a good reason why it appears every year. It is the cross-cutting.
At the risk of being rude, I'm going to have to hurry you.
Yes.
You're over your 4 minutes,
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
President.
sorry about that. I wasn't paying attention yet. So I just wanted to just remind of those goals that are under review this year, to really use this as the platform to even learn more on the impact of COVID-19, for example, on SDG number 4 in particular. So I think one panel did highlight this. The impact on education during the pandemic was quite huge. And this speaks to the divide in the access to the technologies. A point was made that in some countries, like our own developing countries, when schools were closed, it meant they were literally closed. Nobody had an opportunity to learn. But in some other countries, those who had the means in terms of technology could at least do some virtual learning, and they made some modest progress. Let me conclude here to say I want to thank you very much for these very exhaustive and comprehensive discussions. I look forward to carrying these messages back to New York and feeding those into the high-level political forum in July. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, come take a seat over here. Yeah, thanks. All right, next up is Niklas Gustafsson. Niklas is Vice President and Head of Public Policy at Volvo Group. We heard from I believe, one of his colleagues earlier this morning. You've got a mic, okay. There's the timer, which is going to start as soon as you get to the center. Over to you, Nicholas.
Excellent, Axel. Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me to address you at this significant occasion. Significant because time is running out, as we all know. A lot of actions needs to be taken in the coming years in order to succeed with our climate ambitions. I will share with you some of that what we are doing in Volvo Group, but more importantly, what we can do together in partnerships, in collaboration. And I'm not only talking about the private sector ambitions here. By the way, Per Gyllenhammar was the only one representing the private sector here back in '72. And when he stated that we are part of the problem, admitting that we are part of the problem, but also saying that we will be part of the solution. And the key thing is collaboration here and what we can do together in partnerships. And it doesn't matter if you're in the private sector in business, or if you're a policymaker, if you're an NGO, or any kind of actor in the society. We have so many things to do together because the solution can't be made by a single actor out there. And what we are doing now in the climate change challenge, which is the #1 challenge for us. I mean, we are signed up to science-based targets, obviously, scope 1, 2, and 3, and approximately more than 90% of our CO2 footprint is in scope 3. So that's the challenge. And last week in Davos, for instance, we were discussing a lot in different forums on how to measure that. And you know, we don't have standards. We don't know how can we compare one company to another in scope 3, and it's upstream and downstream and what have you. And I said to Al Gore, actually, that was next to me at the table, and well, okay, that's a challenge to know how to measure. But if I as a person wants to lose weight, then yes, I do want to lose weight, and I don't have a scale in front of me, does that mean that I can't have the ambition to lose weight? No, obviously not. So there's a need to sign up to science-based target. If any one of you companies out there haven't done that yet, please do, and just get going. And what we do then in industry, in the partnerships that we do, is all the way from downstream to upstream in all the scopes, in scope 1, 2, and 3. And I can talk for 40 minutes at least about the electrified trucks, the battery electric trucks and the fuel cell electric trucks. I will not do that because I don't have that time. But what is more interesting is actually that it doesn't matter how ambitious Volvo Group is and what we can actually do with our own vehicles. It doesn't solve the whole puzzle. We need to do things together. And for instance, we need fossil-free steel in our trucks and construction equipment. And we revealed one of them this morning, actually, in the presence of Secretary Kerry and the Swedish Environmental Minister. And that was a handover of a ready-built construction machine in fossil-free steel. So it's happening as we speak. And we remember we were starting to talk about fossil-free steel, was it 6-8 months ago, and now we are handing over the first machine. So it is happening, but that is in a partnership, right? It's in the whole value chain, from mining, steel production, and vehicle manufacturing, and the customer then using these machines. By the way, back in the mine again, the same machine. So partnerships is everything in here, and what we need is actually, of course, price on carbon to push this. We need a price on carbon that can actually secure that we make the right decisions in the private sector. And that price on carbon needs to be fair, obviously, but this change will cost. It's just a matter of fact. So it needs to be smart policies around the price on carbon so that everyone can be part of this solution. The other thing we need is a pull effect on market demand. And that is what First Movers Coalition is doing. This is about companies signing up to purchasing commitments. And right now we are 55 companies and 7 different countries, US State Department and Sweden in the lead. And we are committing to pay a premium price for the fossil-free steel, aluminium, trucking, chemicals, cement, what have you. All these hard-to-abate sectors. All of a sudden there is a market pull for those products. And that is what is needed. And that can't be done without collaboration. Thank you, Axel.
Thank you very much indeed. Please take a seat next to President Kilapile. I want to invite Hilda Röd, who is Senior Vice President, Climate and Sustainability from Equinor, up onto the stage. Hilda, come on up. Off you go. There's your clock.
Okay, yeah, this is already on, very good. So I've been asked to give a short explanation of the energy sector's role in both addressing the energy transition but also nature loss. So quite a daunting task in 4 minutes, but I'll give it a go. So I think for all energy companies, really the main way we can contribute to sustainable development is by delivering energy that society needs with lower and lower and eventually net zero emissions. So that has to be the key contribution. Of course, meeting that goal means for us in Equinor that we need to really grow renewable energy, because we need to change how we produce and how we consume energy fundamentally as a society. And that means over time moving away from fossil fuels and to renewable energy. So for us, how do we address that? And when we aim to be a leader in offshore wind, how do we address the impact on nature? Because also these new types of energy comes with nature impact. So I'll give you an example of how we can use technology and innovation to address some of these impacts. We have recently developed the world's first floating wind park of the Scottish coast, Hywind Scotland. And of course, when we develop offshore wind, we need to understand what's the impact on seabirds, what's the impact on fish. And we have used innovation and sent an unmanned vessel from Norway to Scotland. This was a little buoy fueled by sun and wind for 30 days, surveying the area in the North Sea using echo sound to find out, to gather data. We use this kind of data to find out how we can design our offshore wind farms so that we minimize impact, negative impact, and also ensure good coexistence with fisheries. We think there's a big room for data sharing, for research, and for collaboration to really make sure that we get it right as we grow in offshore wind. So this is one of the areas where we have made some important steps going forward. Our roadmap to net zero and cutting emissions from our oil and gas production, growing in renewable energy, but also developing low carbon solutions, of course, remain at the core of our commitments. But we see that we are also expected to do more on addressing nature loss. So last year we launched a new biodiversity policy, and the zero harm has guided our environmental management for many years, for decades actually, and this is something the energy sector is quite used to. Impact assessments, monitoring environmental performance, etc. But now we're expected to have a net positive contribution. And we have also set out an ambition to do that. We don't know exactly how to get there, and I think no one does. So that's quite daunting in itself. So we're working with our partners, with BP, for example, in some of our offshore wind projects, the Empire Wind project off the coast of New York, to pilot some new methodologies. So that, we think, will be an important step going forward. So what do we need now to really address this dual challenge of climate and nature going forward? We believe we need forceful policies, we need regulations. Carbon pricing has been mentioned, couldn't agree more. We need methodologies, we need science, But more than anything, I think we also need actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Please, take a seat. Yeah, take the mic with you. All right, look, we've got a few minutes just to ask you a few questions. And again, I said I'd come to the audience. Hilda, let me start with you. Despite what Equinor is doing in renewables, how hard is it to shift that fossil fuel cloud that hangs over energy companies, especially at forums like this one? Do you spend more time batting away those questions on fossil fuels than trying to push that renewables message successfully?
Well, today I talk primarily about offshore wind, but I think we're very open that oil and gas is the main part of our business still, and will be for a long time, and that has to do with how the energy systems work. We're one of the largest suppliers of gas, or probably the largest supplier at the moment to Europe, and we see that energy security, energy affordability, and climate must be handled as one question. So it will take time. If you look at our investments, I think you will see a clear willingness to really invest in a green shift.
Yeah. Of course, on the fossil fuel part, we were all, I don't know who was there yesterday, reminded of it by the youth representative from Argentina in the session yesterday. Again, there must be a lot of that.
Of course, and we have a lot of dialogue on that, and I think it's a discussion we should have. And of course, we would also like the world to move much faster, and we need to address that. I think it's challenging to see that the demand for fossil fuels is still so high, because that is the truth, and I think we need to discuss that and talk about that. How do you actually address demand? How do you develop the alternatives? Because shutting down oil and gas without having enough renewable energy is also not going to be sustainable. So we need solutions and alternatives, and we need them fast, and we need some honest discussions around the trade-offs and costs of that as well.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much indeed. Niklas, quick question to you. You talked about collaboration. Collaboration within the sector. I imagine, I've spoken to the airlines about this, I've spoken to other sectors about it. How difficult is that really when you could potentially lose a competitive advantage? How difficult is collaboration within the sector?
It is difficult, as I might say, even more difficult in the commercial vehicle sector than others, because we are just a few actors in there, honestly, on the global arena. We need to watch out that we compete with each other. What we do is that we compete every day on what we call today the brown platform, the diesel-driven fossil fuel platform. And we will continue to compete every day of the week on the green platform. But in the transition from the brown to the green, we need to collaborate. And we are doing that. So let me give two examples. One is with our worst competitor out there, Mercedes Trucks, or Daimler Trucks, as their name is, where we actually have joined forces into developing and producing fuel cells for trucks. Fuel cells for trucks is nothing that any one of you has seen really today, because a 60-ton truck is very different, driving maybe 10, 12 hours a day compared to a passenger car on 1 ton that is just going 2 hours maximum a day. So it's a huge difference from a technical perspective. That is one example. Let's collaborate on that, but only on the fuel cell stack. And then this company that we have together invested in, they will provide both Mercedes trucks and Volvo trucks with these fuel cells, and then we will compete again out there to the customers. Second example is on charging for the battery electric vehicles, trucks, buses, construction equipment. We need the chargers. This is this classical chicken and egg questions, right? There we again collaborate with our main competitors, be it Traton Group with Scania and MAN, and with Daimler Trucks again, to actually build 1,700 charging stations in Europe to just get going, And again, we will compete. As soon as those charging stations are built, we will not collaborate any longer. But just to end with, maybe more interesting is not to collaborate within one sector, but actually look at a vertical. For instance, a mining company.
Across.
Cross-sector.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Niklas. And Mr. President, I asked you a form of this question yesterday. Given how off track we are with whether it's the SDGs, 1.5, the human development, human security, is it hard to be optimistic? Because you're optimistic. I've heard you be optimistic. Is it hard?
No, certainly. I mean, as I said, we all know we have not been on track for quite a long time, even before the COVID-19. I think that had already been a challenge. But what we shouldn't do is to kill potential for optimism or hope. I think much as we are off track, for many reasons, and some are beyond, unfortunately, the control of the countries that are grappling with financial constraints which need support to be able to achieve the 2030 agenda. I lead a principal organ, and I think I would not be doing justice to creating continued hope if I'm the one who, raises red flags even when we see them. But my optimism, as I mentioned, is really drawing partly from how enthusiastic the countries are in the process of preparing, for example, for the voluntary national reviews that are coming in July. As I mentioned, I was in Kigali, where I attended the Africa Forum on Sustainable Development, where countries from the region gathered to really share experiences and do peer learning. But what I couldn't actually miss from the conversation was that there was still hope, even as they identified the challenges. Mm-hmm. So I have reason to be optimistic based on that, window. Yep. And also, of course, based on what I heard also from the partners, like the business community.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Look, thank you to all three of you for kicking us off like that. We're going to get to the next three. So please take your seats. Mr. President Kelle Pihle, Niklas Gustafsson, and Hilde Roth, thank you very much indeed. Right, to the next trio. First up, I want to call Bertrand Picard, who's chair of the Solar Impulse Foundation, an explorer, an adventurer. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will know of Bertrand and indeed recognize him. Come on up.
Good afternoon. It's quite moving for me to be here today because my father participated in the first Stockholm summit in 1972, leading a national delegation. And what was it about 50 years ago? It was not climate change, but yet it was pollution, overpopulation, and depletion of natural resources. That was pointed out in the Meadows report. And what were the speeches saying? We have to act now. And why did nobody act? Why is the situation worse today than it was 50 years ago? Because the language of the world is not a language of compassion for the environment. It's a language of job creation and industrial and economical profit. And there were no solutions 50 years ago that could be economically profitable to protect the environment. This is what has changed today. The situation is completely different because the technology has evolved so much that most of the solutions to protect the environment have become economically profitable and they are creating jobs. And this is the language that can federate the people who want to protect the environment and the people who want to support business. So if we look very clearly what is possible today, and I know it really well with all my team at the Solar Impulse Foundation, because since 5 years we have identified solutions everywhere in the world that exist today, create jobs, make profit, and protect the environment. We have 1,400 of these systems, products, materials, devices, sources of energy. And what do they allow us to do today? They allow us to build cities carbon neutral You can recover the demolition waste to turn them into the new concrete with zero carbon cement and new construction technologies to build buildings. And you can operate these buildings with a domotic, with insulation that is so efficient that living in the building today can be carbon neutral. You can shut down all the landfills because there are technologies that allow to take all the waste, even the ones that are not sorted, and turn them into construction stones, gravel, furniture, and so on. In terms of energy, we speak about having more renewable energy, but renewable energy will never be enough if we continue to waste 75% of the energy that is produced in the world, not only with bad behaviors, but mainly with inefficient devices, motors, and problems. So if we put energy efficiency as the priority for all the new devices, all the new systems, all the new infrastructures, renewable energies will become enough. We speak of electric mobility, but electric mobility should not just be a car with batteries. It should be a battery on wheels. In order for the 95% of the time that the car is not running, to store renewable energy from sun and solar when there is enough, in order to give it back to the grid or to the houses when there is not enough renewable. So we see that there are systemic approaches for all the resources. The industry, it's the same. I could give many more examples. Water saving, purifying, recycling, exactly the same. So we see that solutions today will not just come from the people who love nature, they will come from the industry, who will accept to modernize all the infrastructures. Because the problem today is that we still live in the past with very old devices and systems. If we modernize it, it's at the same time the most incredibly profitable market opportunity of the century and the way to save humankind. So you see why it's not enough to say we have to act. Now it's time to show, prove, demonstrate how to act.
Thank you very much, Bertrand. Please take a seat. You know, and while Pernille Halden from H&M is coming up, I've got a very, very quick question to you. I'm breaking the rules here, but yes. You know, you mentioned a few solutions there, smart cities and et cetera, et cetera. Of the 1,000 plus clean and profitable solutions that you are involved in, which one or two excite you most? Which are the most exciting, do you think, to you?
There is one I love very much because it comes from an oil company that is making a reconversion. It's a heat pump that is connected on geothermy. So they drill at 180 meters deep in order to connect the heat pumps, and they can do it not just for individual houses, but also for building in the center of the cities. And it is 6 times more efficient than normal heating systems. So you see everything you can save.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing, and I can give you 1,399 others.
We'll come back to you. Thank you very much indeed, Bertrand. Pernille, come on up. There's the timer. You got your 4 minutes starting now.
Thank you. I represent the industry that you touch every day, that you look upon every day, that you wear every day. It's one of the most ancient industries, and it's the industry that keeps you warm and helps you to express your individuality. I also represent the industry that creates big impact on the environment, on the planet. And we're a company who really would like to use our size and scale to transform the whole industry. Now, let's imagine in 50 years that would be plus 100. Let's imagine climate, that there is no such thing as science-based targets, because there is no need. Let's imagine that there is no thing as renewable energy, because every energy is renewable. Let's imagine that every government has been on this journey and transformed, so there are no regulations stopping the renewable. Circular, let's imagine circular. There is no thing called circular because all the business models are circular. All the products are circular. Imagine also our customers, how they are coming into the store, how they are renting our garments, how they are reselling their garments, how we can use our customers as a resource because we will then not need any new raw materials. Now let's reimagine growth. Growth will still be fundamental, but growth should not be a contradiction to sustainability. Growth should be holistically, both finance and impact on climate. Let's move to today. We are on that journey. We are really on that journey. We have, for example, set for 2030 a goal to double our revenue, halving our emissions. How do you do that without doubling the products? You go circular, you go full on in circular, both on business models, on materials, in the supply chain. You set science-based target, you set high science-based target for the scope 3, where we have our biggest part of emissions. You invest in your suppliers, together with your suppliers, in green investments. You connect with governments, really make them understand that there are legislations that are stopping us from corporate PPAs, stopping us from moving on that journey. Is this journey easy? No, it's not. We are an industry that is heavily targeted with regulations at the moment, and we welcome it. We welcome that process. It's important. However, we need policymakers also to understand our industry, because that's how we can create regulations that create impact. We have the same visions as many policymakers. We just need to cooperate to get there. Fossil fuel cannot be subsidized. Natural resources cannot be for free. Another thing, collaborations. We need to collaborate. We all know that this is a mind shift for everyone. We all know that we all need to take the responsibility. There is not one actor who can do this alone. We need to cooperate. Doing that, I do believe that we will not have a Stockholm plus 100. Thank you.
And impeccable timing, bang on 4 minutes. Thank you very much indeed, Pernilla. Jakob Kiefer, Group Head Public Affairs, ABB, coming up. Thanks.
Thank you so much, and a pleasure being here. I will try to be as on time as Pernilla was. I think one basic premise for any company of our size and with our technology is to collaborate, and many have said so already. We have done this for decades. We are a B2B company, and we are collaborating not only with our customers, but also with policymakers. And the reason for this is that we need all of these stakeholders to deploy our technology. And the good news is that we already have a lot of the existing technology to solve a lot of the climate issues we are faced with today. And I really admire what you said, Mr. Picard, about the solutions that are out there. We would like to start by addressing the need for more and better energy usage. We need more efficiency when it comes to energy. Today, 2/3 of primary energy in the world goes to waste. This includes power generation, it includes transportation, industry, and buildings. And we believe that the best energy is the one we don't waste, but we save it. And just to give you one example, we need to reduce the greenhouse gases from the motors and from the engines around the world. If we can just put one drive to a motor, we can start measuring digitally how much it's using. And by this, we can save about 25% of the energy used. And then you consider that the electric motors account for almost 45% of the world's energy consumption. So that is tremendous saving right there. And this is what we would like to call the energy efficiency movement. We have introduced this to our partners, and we would like to see more companies join this movement. Another very important part is, of course, the consumer behavior. We can do what we can with our customers, but we also need regulations and policies to drive this. I guess we all, as a company, have our own targets. We have decided, and we have in our strategy decided we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. Science-based targets, as once mentioned by Nicholas. And one of the biggest challenges we are facing is to have sustainable supply chains. This is a very complex issue for us. And we have actually taken part in a study with the World Economic Forum to look at what are the obstacles and what are the challenges we are facing. And it's not only the way that we are buying and raw materials, it has a lot to do with regulations, incentives, subsidies even. And here I think we should need to look really into the regulation and how we do that. Because it's not so easy if you're a company present in 100 markets to send back used motors or electric vehicles and so forth, because there simply is not a protocol for it. Just to finalize, I see that time is running out here. There are 3 trends that really drives and makes it possible for us to be successful. It's electrification, automation, and digitalization. And this is what we're doing with our partners around the globe. But we also need a protocol for this, so we can send secure data over borders, respecting privacy. And if I may just use my last 10 minutes, or 10 minutes, maybe seconds. We don't have a robust multilateral trading system today. It's being challenged. And we really need to look at this, because without a multilateral trading system, it's very complex for us to make this technology available for everybody in the world. And I'm thinking about the 1 billion people that will be added to the African population, for example. So let's have a look at that multilateral trading system, and let's support it.
Yep. Good. Thank you so much, Jacob. And indeed, we had a session on multilateralism yesterday and touched on some of these issues. And we might, hopefully we'll have time to come back to it. I just want to ask if Rana Adib is with us to join this session. Yes. Yeah, come on up, Rana. I'll get you a chair here as well. And whilst you're coming up, let me just throw a quick question at 2 of the speakers. I mean, everyone talks about collaboration. Everyone talks about cooperation, the need for collaboration, the need for cooperation. What is the main thing stopping this? Yeah.
I go. There's several main things stopping, but I'd say one is innovations and one is regulations. And to have as the regulations to be perfect, given that impact that we all want, it's not policymakers alone can do that. It's policymakers together with industry, together with civil society. That's how you can create impactful regulations.
Yep, very quick.
Well, I think it's to me, it's not only that we have regulation that is an obstacle, but sometimes things are really complex. Let's take an example. We want to electrify all the boats that transport people in Stockholm. In order for us to be able to put a plug into that passenger vehicle, we need to have electrification coming into the shore, and that's a very complex process of just getting the permits. It's a technologically very advanced thing to do, but you also need a mayor who wants to drive this, and then you need a company to implement it, and then you need to have the permits to do so, and then you have to have a business model that makes this a profitable business. So I don't think it's regulation per se, but it's understanding and somebody who wants to have that vision. Yes, I want to put Stockholm on the map and make it the first one. So it usually starts with one person or a group of people, and then you solve it as you go along. But if there's a will, there's a way.
Okay, very good. Rana, coming up, Rana Adib is Executive Director at REN21, of course, the influential renewable think tank. They haven't put 4-minute clock up, but I'm keeping an eye on my watch. Your 4 minutes starts right now.
Thank you very much. So I guess I'm going to complement what you said and say we've heard about the energy efficiency movement, energy saving movement, that's behavior change. And I bring in the renewable energy movement. What is the space I'm speaking from? I'm speaking from renewable energy. I'm speaking from network, a community of change makers that believes in collaborative power. And I speak from a space which is a space of a cultural hybrid, because we bring basically the diversity of players together that need to be the ones driving societal change. Governments, industry, research, academia, and NGOs. And I'm speaking as a private cultural hybrid that has understood that often it's not about truth only, but about the diversity of perspective. And I think we need to clarify one thing. There is an evidence that we have an energy system that is broken. Fossil fuels responsible for 75% of climate change, of CO2 emissions. It's also broken because there are power dynamics in place. Today, in the current energy crisis, in the political crisis with energy prices, we see that many people around the world are suffering from increased energy prices, whereas some, few, are actually benefiting a lot of those. And I think this is basically when we're looking ahead in Stockholm plus 100, the system we need to change. We need to move away of a system that is not inclusive, that is not serving many, and that is actually rather harming many and harming the environment. Now, why is collaboration and also developing collaborative culture very important here? Because it's not only about changing a technology, it is changing, as we heard, our business model, the markets, and it's a societal choice. So everybody here in the room has the power to engage here. And I think that's actually a message which is really strong. A vehicle to this is, as we heard, behavior change, because you can decide how you consume your energy. But renewable energy also empowers you to decide to produce your own energy, whether you're citizens, a company, a city, a government, a building, a district, a harbor, an airport. And that is something which is actually really empowering, and which also puts at heart the fact that the energy transition is also a change in governance. And here I come back to this part of what is a culture we need to develop if we want to be successful. I think we need to have courage to admit that our ways of exchanging ideas, of having dialogue, is not always helping us to really listen to each other. We have different entry points, we have different interests, there are vested interests, but the reality is we're speaking about a global change and a global crisis where we need to really work together. We heard about how complicated it was partly to work within a sector because there is competition, business models, etc. But we also need to create those spaces where we can actually develop a joint understanding. What does this mean in terms of megawatt hours produced, gigawatt hour produced? Is this really the way different people will connect to what we are saying? So in addition to the evidence and the data, we need to develop narratives. Narratives that inspire, narratives that allow to connect dots and bridge, and also narratives that allow to understand that we do not think alike, but that we have the capacity and the culture to develop basically a common language to make the societal change happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rana. And a quick question on the back of that. And look, I don't want to sound like the doom monger here. And Maria mentioned culture and a culture change. You talked about culture, courage, etc. I guess we haven't really got the time to rewrite the culture bit, have we? That must be one of the biggest problems we face. I'm not saying don't do it, but we're running out of time here.
Yes and no. The reality is, you see, we're working, for instance, on the energy side, and we see that very often we stick to the energy bubble. The reality is that energy consumers, whether we're speaking about the business sector, transport, cities, etc., are fundamental in driving the change because they are asking for renewable energy sources, because they need the renewable electricity to fuel their ship, their cars, their factories, etc. So I think this is basically the part. Culture is also how do we bring those players together in a room and work with them that we are speaking about the same things, that we are not only speaking about the transport service or the energy service, etc., but that we identify the common ground of understanding. So I think it is actually possible to do this. And then there is another part. We are in Europe here. And I think Erasmus has, for instance, when we are speaking about youth a lot, Erasmus has contributed to have an understanding that the realities and the cultures are different. And this means that we are listening to each other differently and that we are not going to impose our view of things only. So maybe we need to think about something like a climate Erasmus worldwide, because this will also help to basically develop another understanding for the realities that are very different in some African countries than in Europe or in the US. So I think it is also policy can drive this, education can drive it, the way we're measuring things can drive it, and the way we talk to each other too.
Yeah. Thank you. Bertrand, when we hear auto companies, energy companies, fashion companies, as we've heard over the last couple of days and today on this stage, talk to us, do you sit there thinking this is the sort of message you really need to hear now? And do you believe the message?
I believe that they would like to do something, but they still don't have the toolbox to reach the goal. So we have to provide two things. One is a clever regulation, because the regulation today is outdated and allows everyone to pollute, which means that a lot of companies comply with the regulation and say we need to do nothing more because what we do is legal. And the second thing, so we need to evaluate with the regulation to push new standards that create a need for the new solutions that exist. And because the solutions exist, we can require the regulation to put them on the market. And who can say that? It's not only the green activists. It's the leaders in the big corporations. They can ask to the governments to have higher standards of regulation because it will give them the certainty that they need to invest in the future, and it will stop the distortion of competitivity between the one who do well and the one who don't do well.
Yep.
So we see the tools exist and really they can be implemented.
And are you doing that? Are you asking for that sort of regulation?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And what's the message you're getting back?
Well, it's not that they don't want, but it's also a process that takes time.
Yeah, I agree with that, but there is one thing taking place that we might not think about. I mean, we are a Fortune 500 company. We ask our 150 biggest suppliers, from where do you get your energy? How do you produce it? So even if there's no legislation or regulation process taking place, this is already happening within the businesses. And I think that messaging that we are sending out as a company, and companies that we are providing solutions to are asking us. Volvo is asking us, how do you produce these guys? You know? So I think that you already have this set in motion without the regulations, but you need the regulation and you need a transparency and you have to be very honest. And also, finally,
John,
you have to be rewarded as a boss and a leader in the executive committee to drive sustainability, and that is also happening.
Go ahead, Bertrand.
Yes, and don't be afraid about regulations. There are regulations everywhere. For hygiene, for health, for education, for taxes, for security, for everything there are regulations to allow us to live well in the society. The only place where the regulation is outdated or doesn't work, it's in the ecology and the environment. So this is what we have to solve.
Maybe just to build on this, because I would agree regulation is really important, and the power which we have, there are many people asking, we need to work collectively towards some tipping points, and this means changing actually the same type of regulations, but coming from different entry points. So I think we spoke about this over lunch, like speaking to the economic ministry and to the energy ministry and to the housing ministry and transportation with similar asks, but from a different perspectives, is amplifying basically the movement and working towards the same coherent, integrated regulatory frameworks.
Yep, okay. And look, a final question to the two of you, and apologies if this is a little provocative. There's a reason I ask it, and the reason is John Stroyer from Calvert is going to be up next. And this is someone who, of course, is making, needs information to make the right investment decisions. Are you being as transparent as you can be for these investors in your companies?
Yes.
I didn't expect you to say no. How about you?
I think we tried to, but it's very complex, of course, and we are operating in 110 markets or so, with 105,000 employees globally. But I think what we need is a system that makes it possible for us to compare the notes. What does it mean when you have energy efficiency? What do you mean by that? Is it like you have an IE5 motor, IE3? So that's why we need a taxonomy that is fair and just. So I think we're getting there, but for sure, I think if you say we have a perfect system, I don't think so. Okay. We have to be honest about that.
Okay. Very quickly.
At the Solar Impulse Foundation, we have 370 external experts and independent experts who judge if the solutions we identified and labeled are profitable, which means that it's obvious we have this label that proves it, and all the investors who would like to invest into those solutions know that it's profitable. So it's like a half of a due diligence. Then the other half of the due diligence has to be done on the management of the company. This we don't do, but we can already prove that it's worth investing in them.
Okay, look, thank you very much indeed for your candor and for your insights. It's been super. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to get the next speaker up. And as I just said, it is, thank you so much, everyone. It is John Stroyer, President and CEO, Calvert Research and Management. John's going to join us remotely. Yep, there he is. John, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, and I think I've been unmuted now, so you can even hear me.
Very good. Wonderful to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. I don't know if you heard the question I just put to a couple of the corporates on transparency. Look, you've got 4 minutes to give us your pitch, to give us your take, and then we'll do a little bit of a Q&A on the back of that. So your 4 minutes starts now, John.
Okay, terrific, and pleasure to join everybody for this discussion. And I've been listening to the speakers and also very respectful of the fact that this is the 50th anniversary of the first meeting. And I'm hearing things about regulations and fully engaged markets and lots of concepts around group action and action across different industries. Of course, all that is needed. I want to focus in on how to actually make that happen in the capitalist system that we're operating within. And you asked the question about transparency, are corporations providing enough information? It is changing. And at this very moment, regulators in the US and in the EU are considering additional rules to get companies to provide more transparency into their impact on the environment. And I think this is a very important concept that is necessary in order to achieve on many of the ideas that have been presented. And the issue is the pricing of externalities, or we've heard the concept of let's put a price on carbon. Let's put a price on carbon emissions. Let's put a price on pollution. Those are important concepts to work with. And creating not just the transparency in terms of how a company is actually impacting the environment, which the regulators are now beginning to ask for, beginning to ask companies to give information regarding their carbon emissions, at least. That's a start, but it's just a start. So we will get transparency to emissions over time. That is going to happen. The question is, what price will society put on carbon emissions? How much are we willing to pay to fix the problem? And this is where we really need to engage and get markets involved. So in addition to creating the transparency and an understanding of the impact, the pricing of that impact is critical. That price has to be adequate so that it will encourage investment to solve the problem. And our focus also needs then to be on justice, doing this in a way that will work for the people in less developed countries who have not had 200 years of economic growth and development using a lot of fossil fuels to get to this point. So transparency, pricing, and doing this in a way that is fair and just around the world. I think that shifts some of the concepts away from simply regulation or creating transparency towards market pricing and accommodating poor people around the world who will really need help as the cost of energy inevitably goes up, so that we can produce it in a clean and sustainable way. And by the way, once we're transparent and we have appropriate pricing mechanisms for energy, we also need to do this for all of the other environmental impacts. Water would be probably very high on the list, but environmental sustainability isn't limited to carbon emissions. It includes biodiversity, forest management, water management, many, many other issues, ocean health, just to name a few. And those will all need to have appropriate pricing mechanisms and transparency so that markets can price sustainability fairly and properly. And I'll close my comments by introducing, I think, the obvious concept. If we spend more money taking better care of the environment and we spend more money reducing carbon emissions, we have to be prepared for lower financial returns. And that calculus is simple. The economy is a closed system. If we increase our cost of producing energy, so we do it in a sustainable way, that's going to come from someplace. And it can't come from, it should not come from wages or creating more difficult circumstances for poor people. It has to come from lower expected financial returns. That's the math, and that's how that will work. So thank you. I think that that took up all of my 4 minutes.
It did, John, but it was fascinating. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'm going to try and pin you down on a couple of things, if I may. What is the level, John, of real transparency from carbon-intensive businesses right now? If you could rate that from 1 to 10, where are we now? Real transparency.
It's like a 3, and it's not because these are companies necessarily trying to hide things. We haven't necessarily calculated this in industrial processes all that well. So an entire system needs to be built to properly produce the data, the information internally, so that transparency can be provided. But the accuracy of the information and the extent of the information is what I'm thinking about when I rate it I think I said a 3.
Yeah, a 3, okay. I asked a couple of the corporates, a couple sectors just now, I think you heard it, whether they're giving you, and people like you, asset managers, asset owners, whoever it is, everything you need to make the right investment decisions. What else would you like to see to make the right investment decisions?
Well, I think the focus has to be on the future. And the capital spending plan, the specific capital spending plans that any company has to eliminate the problem associated with the harm that they do to the environment, whether it's carbon emissions or other harms that I mentioned, water, again, being high up on the list. What we need to understand is a specific capital spending plan in place to solve the problem. How long will it take? How much money will it cost? What is the time frame? Specific plans. That's what we need. And we get that from very, very few companies, which indicates very, very few companies have created a specific plan that actually solves the problem that we're talking about. But that's what we need.
Final question, John. How can the markets get better information? What can you do to provide? How do they get that information? What do you think we need to start pushing?
I think there are two things that are happening. As I mentioned earlier, regulators in the US and in the EU are creating new guidelines for companies to provide information. So, one effort is on the regulatory front, requiring companies to provide certain information. That's good. It will only get us so far. In other words, they're not going to ask for everything that we want, and it's going to take time. So the other process is estimation methodology. Investors and markets using models to attempt to estimate a company's impact. I think that's helpful and that's useful, but that in and of itself, experts making estimates, using those in models, that won't fix the market problem. So in order for this to really happen, we do need the primary regulators in the US and the EU and throughout the world to create disclosure requirements that are robust and will get us that information. In order, that is what is needed for the information to permeate the markets.
Okay. John, really appreciate your time today. Many thanks for your thoughts. John Stroyer, Calvert Research and Management. Right, earlier I asked Li Zhengguo, the founder and president at Longi, about creating impact and the meaning of leadership. This is what he had to say.
你好，主持人。在碳中和已经成为全球性共识的大背景下，可再生能源成为了支撑全球能源转型的基石。以光伏为代表的可再生能源在新增装机中占比不断上升，是大势所趋。光伏发电也已经成为全球增长速度最快的可再生能源。2021年，全球新增光伏装机量约为183吉瓦。截止2022年3月底，全球累计光伏装机总量已经成功跨越1T瓦大关，光伏正式进入太瓦级时代。我们并不认为这一趋势会有所放缓，恰恰相反，全球光伏市场在未来仍将保持高速增长的态势。最近，欧盟委员会就发布了一项总额约3000亿欧元的为欧盟重新供能投资计划，希望在今后数年通过建设清洁运输走廊、清洁电力传输线路、太阳能屋顶安装、能源网络建设升级以及进口更多氢能源等措施，加快欧洲国家向清洁能源转型。根据预测，到2030年，全球新增光伏装机需要达到1500吉瓦到2000吉瓦，且连续安装30年才能等全球能源转型形成有效支撑，进而为实现全球碳中和奠定基础。发展中国家和最不发达国家因为仍处在发展过程之中，所以在能源消费方面保持上升是客观发展趋势。但发展中国家和最不发达国家也需要更加大力度走向绿色低碳能源转型之路。这些国家应该尽快制定完善能源转型相关的政策和路线图，推动传统化石能源消费向清洁能源消费转型，通过联合国框架内的互助合作机制，迅速果断的行动，实现向可持续道路的跨越式发展。自2010年以来，光伏技术革新使得度电成本已经下降了超过90%，目前已经成为全球绝大多数国家最经济的电力能源。仅去年1年，隆基就先后7次打破光伏电池转换效率世界纪录，实现了多项关键技术突破。通过让人们享受到可负担的清洁能源， 对于助力消除全球不平等发展，建立一个实现各方繁荣发达的健康地球，具有重要的意义。隆基非常重视联合国可持续发展目标，并持续推动其与业务价值链结合，将促进可持续发展理念和行动全面融入到企业的战略和运营。太阳能的一个发展，对全球构建多边关系、消除差距有重要意义。首先呢，太阳光是一种几乎无限的能源。谢谢大家。
So Longi's founder and president, Ali Zhengo, who spoke to us a little bit earlier. I want to move now to our final trio of speakers. Steve Kokoda is executive director of the International Copper Association. Steve, if you could come on up and give us your 4 minutes. After that, I'd like Kara Tael and Lee George Lam to join. Stay where you are for now, but you'll be the next two up. Steve, you got a mic?
I do. And
4 minutes is there. Floor is yours.
I see the clock. Thank you. You know, I want to start off by sharing an anecdote that I shared with you, Axel, at lunch. We were sitting together. What was missing in this Zoom world that we lived in for a couple of years was this collaboration, right? You know, we did what we could to survive, but really I think the true partnership building took a step back, and it's nice to see it return. You know, I've spoke a couple of times now with the president of ECOSOC, and there's a couple of opportunities where we can collaborate that would have been unknown. I saw Bertrand Picard, and he and I go back quite a few years, and you know, we spoke about this idea to build a global motors efficiency program, and then I'm sitting next to ABB, and I said, I have to connect you, Jakob, with Bertrand, and thanks to Axel, he did it for me. They were sitting together on the stage, right? So I'm just grateful for this opportunity to be back in person together. You know, I've spoken a lot. You've heard me twice already, those who've been here for a couple of days, speak about the power and the importance of partnerships, and I'm going to touch on that again, but maybe from a slightly different tack. There's quite a lot of industry here, and you know, all companies do good things in the communities where they operate. I mean, that's almost universal. And that's because you have CSR obligations, corporate social responsibility. So you have to be honest with yourselves in saying that you're doing these things typically because you're forced to do them. You know, I think as industry, we need to put more focus on the things we don't have to do, and to do things because they need to be done. You know, you heard me speak about new partnerships that we've formed in Africa, and we typically build our partnerships around SDG 7. And you know, we've come to realize in the last few months that, you know, that's important, and we're really good at it, right? But we should be doing more. So we have designs now to get into education, right, in Africa, into water supply issues, into, you know, empowering local communities with the equipment that they need to, you know, it's difficult to say transition in Africa to clean energy. They just need energy, right? So let's help them just to, you know, to do it in a renewable way right from the beginning. And, you know, we don't have to do these things, but, you know, we realize we should be doing that. You know, what is, as a company, you have to ask yourself, and forgive my poor French, what's your raison d'etre? What's your reason for existence? You know, for us, we decided as the International Copper Association that it's in making an impact on the SDGs. It's as simple as that. I was in Rwanda just 2 weeks ago at the Sustainable Energy for All Forum, and we were in a bus going to a lavish dinner, and just, you know, on the side of the road was a young family, a mother with her 2 children, I would say ages maybe 7 and 5, and everyone was carrying a large jug of water above their head. And this was about 7 p.m., the sun was almost down, and they shouldn't need to be doing that, right? You would hope the kids would be home and studying and spending time doing quality things with their parents, but that wasn't the case, and that really, really struck me. So the message, you know, to the companies here is to, you know, do the things that you don't have to do things that need to be done. You know, Nicholas from, you know, Volvo, you know, he talked about competitiveness, right? if we're going to make advancements on the SDGs, wherever we can, we've got to leave competitiveness at the door, right? So my last message there would be, partnerships will help you get past competitiveness. And then, maybe a bit self-serving is to use the trade associations, like mine. We give you a platform to bring competitors together and to operate in a non-competitive way and to do good things. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Axel.
That's great, Steve. Thank you so much. And I should have said Steve Kokoda, of course, is from the International Copper Association, but I'm sure you all knew that anyway. Right. Let me bring Kaha Tael, apologies if I got the pronunciation wrong, Ambassador at Large for Climate and Energy Policy of Estonia, up onto the stage. Welcome.
Thank you, Alex. It's actually pronounced Kaya, but that's quite all right. Ladies and gentlemen, in 50 years from now, we are going to live in a renewable world. Now, how can I be so convinced about this? Despite of not enough transparency in fossil fuels, despite of too high cost for hydrogen, for example, despite of lack of regulations and everything else. Well, first of all, we have had wonderful input from the stage, from technological companies. They are convinced. That's very good. But secondly, we had the company of Equinor on the stage who said that their investment in the future is going to be in the renewables. This is amazing. This is also something which has happened in my country, which was totally dependent on our local fossil fuel. And now we have an energy champion, regional champion, who has halved the emissions by now and is also going to phase out fossil fuel in the 2030s. So this is happening. How has it happened? Because the European Union has actually sent out very precise policy signals for the market. We have classified the renewables, we have created support schemes, we have talked about possibilities for state aid, and the market has listened. There is a market for renewables in the European Union. Now we need to do it globally. And of course, we need to set the carbon price right and so on and so on. But it is going to happen. And not despite of the war in Europe, which is going on and which will set us back in many ways in the civilization, but because of the war. Because the renewables will create a totally new picture of energy security. It will empower new countries in the world, and it will also create a new culture between the consumer and the producer. And for the countries who are just starting this path to the renewables, I have one message. Take the best from the very beginning. And I'm not thinking about cutting-edge technologies and the most expensive ones, but I'm saying take the best, take digital. Become digital from the very start. The companies could tell you why digital is good for their business model. I can tell you why digital is good for the consumer, because you empower, actually, your consumer. You take control of your energy consumption. Of course, you demand renewables, but you also save energy when you have the knowledge when the energy is most efficient to use in your homes. So the transition really needs to be twin transition, not only energy transition, but also digital transition. And well, we have talked yesterday that we created a new platform for exchanging knowledge about this, the DEAL platform. Estonia actually has the ambition to become the greenest digital society in the world by 2030. That's fine, but we cannot do it. Why? Because we measure our footprint, but does everybody else? So let's measure, let's have data, let's please, ladies and gentlemen, help us to become the greenest digital society by measuring your own footprint. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Last speaker, Lee George Lam, Chairman of Hong Kong Cyberport. Might not be with us.
Yes.
Oh, he's on the screen.
Hello.
I'm sorry. There you are. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Lee, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. I know it's a late hour there. You've got 4 minutes to give us your TED-style pitch, and then we'll do a couple of rounds of questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think with facilitated by the momentum and spirit of Stockholm plus 50, for 50 years, the world has come together to confront the triple planetary crisis consisting of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste. And over the past 2 years or so, we have added one more global issue, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we must build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, as a representative from the business sector and from Asia and the Pacific, we must, from our perspective, we must accept, adopt a new deal for business, and that's the Green Deal, aimed at going for a green transformation by taking specific actions across such important areas such as green energy, green infrastructure and logistics, green finance, green innovation, green production, consumption, and waste. Lots of actions to be taken there. And the business sector must take the lead because we have a lot of resources with us. We have financing for development. We have resources in the area of science, technology, and innovation. So we must lead and mobilize more support to work with governments and communities for a sustainable and inclusive future for all. With the support from the business sector, we can better mobilize big investments, technical support, regulatory changes, as well as educational efforts to make sure we can make progress. I can see some important actions immediately ahead of us. One is to align business strategies with ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance principles. And we must adopt and implement ESG plus. That means ESG plus science, technology, and innovation, such as fintech, prop tech, green tech, clean tech, and all these digital transformation tools that we can actually do a better job with ESG investment. What gets measured gets done. So we need to make sure that we have data integrity and also data-driven innovation implemented. And we need more leadership for the business sector to come out with more mobilization. There are so many challenges and opportunities right here and now, and including, for example, there are many stock exchanges around the world that need to actually put in more aggressive corporate governance guidelines to push for more ESG investments. And we need to do more in the developing world. For example, by 2050, there will be about 75%, of global emission coming from developing countries, for example. So we must act now, and we must work together to implement, in particular, SDG 17 towards better partnership together. Now, with that, hopefully, as we approach Stockholm plus 100, we are talking about stewardship, for a healthy planet, for the prosperity for all. And it is sustainable and inclusive as well. So business leadership, a must.
Yep. Lee, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Very quick question on the back of that. What are the signals you're getting in the region that you're in from business in terms of how prepared they are to do the right thing and to do the things that you're asking of them?
Yeah, I think the region, my region, Asia and the Pacific, is really moving very fast now. In particular, China already set the carbon neutrality goal to be achieved by the year 2060. And in Hong Kong, where I reside, we already set 2050 as the year that we achieve net zero carbon. So that is one example. And then if you look at all the stock markets in Asia and the Pacific, you see that ESG best practices are being put in place. Although I just said we need to see more, and we need to have more measurement and regulatory monitoring and so on to mobilize more resources in the ESG investment. And we see more and more of that. Now, every major investor, institutional investor in Asia and the Pacific, if you ask them, are you ESG investor? Most likely they will say, yes, we are. So we are seeing good momentum, but we need to do more. I think in particular, education is important. We need to actually educate the next generation, our youth, and also help SMEs.
Yeah, very good. Lee, thank you very much. And we come back full circle to the education bit. Steve, just a quick question for you. As an extractive industry, how do you navigate the SDG landscape? How hard is it? How frustrating is it? How testing is it to navigate that landscape?
No, it's difficult. It's gotten better over time. I think we've made a conscious decision quite a number of years ago to integrate ourselves into the discussion, but to do so in a way where we prove our worth and to really take action and not to do greenwashing. Really conscious of that. In any communicating to any audience, you're going to have a bell curve. On one end, you're going to have an audience where you can do no right, and on the other side where you can do no wrong. And neither one of those are realistic positions. So we try to operate in the rest of that space. And an important stakeholder is the youth, and I'm glad it was just brought up again. And I forgot to mention it earlier. It was good to see the youth represented here in the forum. And a message for Shireen and her team is that I think rather than being in the audience, or not only in the audience, I think next time we need to get the youth onto the stage. I mentioned the Sustainable Innovation for All Forum a couple of weeks ago, and the youth had their own constituency there. They had events. I had the honor of co-facilitating an event. I learned more in that hour because I hadn't been listening to young people enough. So let's all, everything that we do should be built towards that. And you say another challenge for an extractive industry is getting young people interested in joining one.
And I'm glad you mentioned it. We're, in fact, after we've just had this final con, we're going to hear from one of the youth representatives as a final thought. So do thank you for mentioning that. Thank you for reminding me that we have that representative to speak. You said there's a market for renewables in the EU. Now we need to do it globally. You didn't say how hopeful you are that we can do that or we can do it quickly enough.
In the previous panel, I believe, was the chairman of LONGI. Didn't you listen to him? What did he say? He said that we need this global market. And so I am a bit hopeful. It's, at the moment, it's going rather slowly, but we can, of course, start from national carbon markets and then move onwards. And the European Union doesn't only have our own market. We're actually using now this instrument for a small push, this carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will hopefully be an incentive also for other countries.
Very good. Thank you so much. Look, I'm gonna stop us there. Lee, Kaya, and Steve, Thank you. A lot of names today. I apologize. Yeah. Thank you so much for your thoughts, your insights. Thanks very much indeed. Right, I did say, thank you very much. Yeah. I did say we're going to just finish up with a couple of comments. First, we're going to hear from civil society. Very, very quick, these comments need to be. We're running a little bit short on time again. And then we're going to hear from youth. Dr. Mohammed Abd El Rauf is co-chair of major groups and stakeholders. You have an intervention, Mohammed. Are you there? Yeah. Come up here and grab a mic and, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I will be very brief, and thank you, Shireen, and all the team for inviting major groups and civil society. It's really a great pleasure for youth representatives, science representatives, and many other major groups to participate in the Science Policy Business Forum. I hope that UN forums and governments around the world engage major group the way Science Policy Business Forum have been engaging major groups since like 3-4 years back. It has been a very successful engagement. I also see the chance, and I will finish very quickly because the major groups dialogue will happen in this hall just immediately after we finish. So I invite you to stay for only like 1 hour, where we listen from different major groups' voices, opinions. What I want to say is that major groups, including youth, farmers, and so on, different constituencies, as you know, the 9 major groups from Agenda 21, play a multiple role. They inform citizens, they inform governments, they monitor government actions and policies, they evaluate these policies, they hold government accountable, they inform different alternative policies. They play a lot of important role, and they bring a lot of new ideas to the table. Let me just give you a couple of examples very quickly. I know one colleague in one African country, no need to name it, where they wanted to build a dam, on a small dam on a river, and they brought a big technology companies and so on, and they built the dam. After a few months, the dam collapsed. Why? Because they didn't consult the indigenous community. There is a specific type of insect in this area that can make holes in the dam buildings. So you need to involve communities, local communities, indigenous peoples. You can bring the most technology you want. You can bring artificial intelligence, predict the weather, the rainfall patterns. But if you consult the local farmers, he can tell you that it will be a very heavy rain season, and it will come very early because he spot a specific bird or a specific insect, and then can tell you it's a very hot season. What I wanted to say, if we want a systematic change, if we want a good governance, if we want inclusiveness, we should involve all stakeholders, and major group play an important role. What I hope to see in the future and next 50, 100 years, maybe a full engagement of major groups. We need to create the right mechanisms for good entry points for major groups. I need to see them not only as observers, I need to have the same right as governments. I think this is the biggest obstacles we are facing, that in many governments in the world, they are still not realizing the full benefits and potential of major groups. They can release a lot of burden, a lot of economic burden, a lot of activities by depending on civil society and major groups. Major groups do it by passion. They understand the local communities, the needs and the concerns. If we want a good governance in the next 50 years, if we want to avoid past mistakes, we should involve major groups in all our activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Mohammed. And a final word, and I think it's quite right, and I'm sure everyone agrees that we finish with the youth. Manasiti Omar is a youth representative, indigenous climate justice activist, and founder of Spring of the Arid and Semi-Arid Lands. Manasiti, come on up. Welcome.
Dear panelists and distinguished participants, my name is Manasiti Omar. from Kenya, which is a co-host of Stockholm 50 meeting, speaking on behalf of the Children and Youth Major Group of UNEP and Indigenous Pastoral Communities of Kenya. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the people who couldn't make it here due to war, lack of internet access, etc., the privileges that most of us have access to. I stand in solidarity with them. On expediting action to achieve the SDGs and bridging the implementation gap, I bring forth the following interventions. Developing countries in Africa require adequate finance for sustainable development and transitioning to more resilient and adaptive ways, as we are experiencing loss and damage caused by developing nations. Climate finance should reach grassroots organizations working with affected communities and not end up in big organizations that are looking into their own interests rather than those of the affected and vulnerable communities. Achieving the SDGs also requires the inclusion of most affected people and communities and their diverse representation from different regions of the world at all levels of decision making and implementation, as they possess indigenous knowledge, which is important in tackling climate change and have been custodians of nature since time immemorial. Lastly, climate justice activists, especially those from indigenous backgrounds, should be supported, given a platform and listened to, as they represent important communities, as I had said before, who are custodians of nature or biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Ben Sandhouse-James. I'm from the UK, and again speaking on behalf of the Major Group on Children and Youth. I just want to offer a few reflections on the past 2 days.
Bring the mic up a little closer. Yeah.
And as we look forward to Stockholm plus 50. So we are extremely encouraged by the conversations that have taken place over the last 2 days. This type of multi-stakeholder cooperation really offers a pragmatic antidote to the popular rhetoric around environmental externalities. It doesn't seek to fearmonger, blame, or polarize, nor does it always demand ban, suspension, or regulation. But sometimes, of course, as we have heard, that is necessary. Instead, it seeks to use financial and human capital to facilitate a truly collaborative and equitable transition to net zero. Now, the past 2 years have shown that human, planetary, and economic health are fundamentally interconnected. We can't consider such issues in isolation. This forum has allowed us to accelerate our common agenda, but if we are to create a common future, then a common purpose must also be found. Sense of shared ownership of our environmental destiny and responsibility for our own fate will prove critical. A more collaborative, interdisciplinary, and holistic vision for our planet's governance is not out of reach. But this will require hearing the voices of others, even when we might disagree with them. As leaders across government, industry, and business, you have a duty, or even an obligation, to engage with our generation, even if those truths may sometimes hurt. And I particularly say that whilst some progress, albeit not enough, has been made in the multilateral negotiation sphere, there's actually still quite a lot of work to be done when it comes to industrial and business engagement with young voices. And I think that that's something that hopefully we will see more of in the coming years. This forum has espoused values of collaboration, cooperation, and conversation. This is the type of dialogue that we wish to promote and hope to see more of. Now is the time at Stockholm plus 50 to put these values and the recommendations of the forum into expedited action. The world is waiting and watching, and we, as the future custodians of this planet, will hold you to account. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And look, I think we should leave it on that, because I think that was very well said. Are you excited by what you've heard at all? No? Not at all. Who is that? And you're another youth representative, right? Yes, I am. Okay. Hold on one sec. Let's get you a mic very quickly. Make it really, really... I hate to say this, but we are running out of time. But yeah, go ahead, please.
I'm really disappointed to see how there's very little representation of our diverse world in this forum. I'm also sad to see how there's always talk about scientific knowledge, but there's no talk acknowledging indigenous communities and indigenous people who have been protecting our earth for all these centuries. And words like carbon neutral by 2060, when some of you guys won't even be around, no disrespect to you all. I have huge respect for you. But yeah, we are the ones who are going to be reeling with the effects of the climate crisis with our children. So yeah, it is very disappointing to hear some of the words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No, I appreciate your honesty there. Thanks very much. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything else very quickly to finish up. Yeah, you good?
I'm good from my side.
All right, I appreciate it, and thank you for that. Thank you for your honesty. And you know, I represent a news organization. I don't represent the United Nations, but of course they take on board all of these comments, and hopefully it'll all be inputted into the next forum. Right, it just remains for me to say thank you very much to all of our speakers. It's been a fun afternoon. It's been a busy afternoon. Thank you to you as well for your questions and your attention over the past couple of days. We now move to the Kunstgarten to unveil the Legacy Data art piece by John Munro and ring in the start of the Concert for Peace and the Planet with Ricky Kej and Ellie Goulding. So thank you very much indeed. Enjoy that. We'll see you next time. Thank you.